ended World War II. Joining us now to discuss is Jane Hampton Cook, presidential historian and award-winning author of 18 books. So Jane, thank you for staying with us. Can you walk us through the historical significance, of holding the commemoration on the deck of the USS Missouri?
Well, President Truman at the time said we will never forget Pearl Harbor, and the Japanese military leaders would never forget the USS Missouri. And that's because that is where the official surrender took place between the Allies and Japan. And we came in, the Americans came in, and not only were we, had we defeated them militarily, but we helped them get into a new phase of life. We turned Japan back to its people in 1952, and we helped them develop a democracy. We helped them have representative government. And so that's the difference. We didn't hold on to Japan as a power. We trained them and helped them get back on their feet financially as well. And so I think that's what's exciting about a day like today, where we can see the big picture, and we can see that, capitalism and representative government came out of that horrible war.
So then, in your view, Jane, how do these memorials and commemorative events, how do they help Americans exactly understand the impact World War II had on our world?
Well, I think it reminds Americans that there was a time where Hitler was, a tyrant, and that's what I think these events do. They remind us of liberty over tyranny, and that's a really important thing to remember. And so I think that that's one of the ways that we can think about days like today, where there's a commemoration, is that we remember what it was once like, and I think that that's an important thing to remember every now and then when we get caught up in today's world. It's good to take a step back and look at the big picture.
Can you also speak to as well, Jane, in what ways did America's military and industry during World War II distinguish itself from other nations?
Well, we were such a larger country than most of the other nations. And so we went to work in the factories to build the weapons and the ammunitions. I mean, this affected my family. My grandparents in Arkansas left Little Rock, and then they moved to Seattle, where my grandfather, who was too old to be a soldier, he started working in a factory. And that's how they helped the war effort. And so it was really a collective effort for Americans at home and, of course, those deployed. So that's one way I think we were different. France isn't that large of a country, and those smaller countries that fell, they just didn't have the infrastructure that America had as being a large country with a big ocean in between.
So the U.S. is a global superpower. How did World War II pave the way for the United States to become that?
Well, we were a power, but we really weren't a superpower before World War II. And the effort that we put in to send troops to fight to end the tyranny of Hitler and all of those things put us into a position to be a superpower. And so militarily, we demonstrated our capabilities as a superpower during World War II. And then after the war, the way the war ended, the Cold War that came out of that, that's where we diplomatically and politically emerged as a superpower, was through, retraining people, for example, in Japan, reorganizing their government and making it a representative government. That was the heft that we had after World War II. Was not just military, but it was also politically and diplomatically.
And as well, Jane, I think one aspect that we have to mention here is, can you talk to us about the nuclear program, the U.S. nuclear program, and the role it played in the context of global power dynamics?
Well, sure. The nuclear capability changed everything, because the calculus became, does this country that we are working against or need to work with have nuclear weapons? And so that became the litmus test for everything. And that's why the Cold War proliferated, because Russia got the bomb and we had the bomb. And it's been a dance, really, to try to never get to the point where nuclear weapons are needed. And of course, that's the concern, right now with the conflict in Ukraine. We don't want to get to the point of escalation where nuclear weapons are used by us or by Russia. And so it's dictated really everything. It's a factors that you just can't ignore.
And what about American wartime alliances? How have they evolved since World War II?
I think this is fascinating because we were allied with China. We were allied with Russia as the Soviet Union during World War II. And today we see those countries as in an adversarial role quite often. But now we are allied with Japan when Japan was our mutual enemy with China during World War II. And so the alliances have shifted around and moved, and it's depended on economics and military and politics. But that's what I think is really fascinating, is that some of those alliances have flipped over the years because of the changes in the different countries that came out of World War II.
Right, that is interesting to think about. What are your thoughts on how did the war transform the United States domestic politics?
Well, what's interesting is that this was a big switch back to the way it had been. Before World War II and really before the Great Depression, we'd seesawed back and forth between Republican and Democrat when it came to the presidency. But Franklin Roosevelt, because of the Depression, became president, and he won 4 terms, which had never been done before. And the Democrats controlled the presidency for 14 years. And so after World War II, with the election of the former commander of the Supreme Allied Commander, Dwight Eisenhower, he became president as a Republican. And that election shifted us back to that pattern of Republican for president, Democrat for president. And we've kind of seesawed since then. But during World War II, it was all led by a Democratic president.
And just finally, Jane, can you give us your thoughts, your take as well on how did the U.S. post-war strategy and policy contribute to it becoming a superpower?
Well, I think the fact that we reached out diplomatically to so many countries, that we were able to change our relationship with Japan, for example. We also implemented the CIA, and that we didn't have the CIA before World War II. And so that has changed the way we look at things. And that's, an agency that's been discussed a lot lately with the Trump administration. And so, we grew as a country, both physically and our capabilities militarily, but also took on this greater role of being a diplomat. I mean, look at what President Trump has done with the NATO alliance. He had a lot of them come visit him at the same time in the White House 2 weeks ago. And I think that just shows you the power of the United States in bringing those European leaders together to talk about what to do with Ukraine and the Russian war.
And I think the president would say that tariffs is one of those abilities that has made the U.S. So powerful, as we heard in that press briefing earlier. Well, Jane, that's our time today. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, a federal judge in San Francisco ruled today that it wasn't lawful for the president to use